Ask for a resolution to approve the minutes of the last meeting. Evelyn and John, any changes, discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, carried. Okay, we don't have to have our argument today about who's going first,
No, we don't.
so we're gonna go with beauty rather than,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Linda, you want to, present?
Okay, for the budget,
There's not a lot of significant changes, I don't think.
no, we just need to, employee, 12,619, he's actually, it's actually part of the, 80-22 budget, not the 80-21, so that needs to be moved. And then, employee 8898 is, also not included in the, it should not be included in the 80-21 budget. It comes out of, it'll come out of the, capital fund. So that needs to be fixed. And also the, 8898, employee, we're gonna decrease it by $5,000, or decrease it to $5,000 for the year 2016. And also, the 12,619, that's gonna decrease by 8,800 because it's in the budget for, the whole year, but it's only, it'll be over by the end of June. Let's see, what else do we have? 80-21, the part-time salary, he wants to, reduce by $10,000. Since our CDBG, funding will be winding down. 80-29 local waterfront, he's requesting, $20,000 instead of, I think there was 5. He had 5 in there, but he's requesting 20,000. Let's see. And then he would like to, number 6, he wants to include an assistant county planner title. And then, this would allow for a test to be ordered to establish a list, so when Wayne plans on retiring.
Succession planning, essentially.
And then the last one, they want to replace the office specialist title with a fiscal manager, which would reflect a $10,000 increase in salary.
And that's been offset, right?
Yes. Yep. 50% of it will be from the reimbursements through the LWRP grant, and it'll eliminate the $2,700 of overtime.
What does the civil service definition say? I mean, is that person's job duties more in alignment with the fiscal manager than they are office specialist?
I believe it is, John. I think what happened is when we restructured the office, this person now does more of the fiscal work as opposed to the office work.
Well, and if that's the case, then we would be better aligned with civil service requirements.
I think so. I think that was Wayne's purpose, and I think he was working with Trish on that.
Any other questions on the budget? Someone like to make a resolution to move it forward to the budget committee with the changes that were described? Evelyn? John? Any further discussion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I had one question on number 5. Request to increase this line to $20,000 to cover costs of project here. You said it was $5,000 before, and so we're increasing $20,000 our share. Is that correct?
No, it's the local share. If you read the second part of it, it says to cover the project cost share, that is the local share of grant activities. So the towns that are the beneficiary of the local waterfront would be putting that money forward, as I understand it.
So 20,000 is required,
Yes.
so that's the bottom line.
Alright,
Okay, any other questions? Have a motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you, Glenda. Okay, Ed, first of all, we have, number one is authorizing the chairman of the board to sign a letter of support for the Capital Region Economic Development Council's submission for $500 million in the Upstate Revitalization Initiative as requested by Kathleen Jamino, Rensselaer County Executive, and Kathy Sheehan, Mayor of Albany. Any discussion on this issue?
Yeah, I was going to just briefly outline that as a result of the request from Warren County and EDC, the Capital Region Economic Development Council has had 3 meetings within Warren County during the past couple of months. One was the CFA process was held at the Fort William Henry earlier this summer. And there were 2 URI presentations made, one at SUNY at Adirondack, and last week we had a follow-up at Crandall Library. I can report that Warren County had, if not the first, the second highest attendance at those respective meetings. And I demonstrated the interest as well as the knowledge of the participants at these meetings that were held. The request is being forwarded to all of the municipalities as well as to organizations like EDC. EDC has submitted a letter indicating support, as well as the Adirondack Gateway Council, for the submittal of a plan. The plan talks in very general terms. It was not for specific projects. When we are successful as one of the top 3, then those people in organizations that have submitted ideas for a project, or other communities and applicants may come forward. At that point, there will be a reach out, and almost like a CFA process at this point. So the overview at this point is to focus on workforce development tied into education, something that has been promoted by this county, by Dr. Duffy at the SUNY of Adirondack. Another intertwined with that is really to look at manufacturing, advanced manufacturing, and technology. And again, we have components of advanced manufacturing here within Warren County, highlighting to the medical device industries, as well as some of the other related industries to the medical device in those particular areas. It did talk about, in its broadest sense, affordable housing and transportation in this area. There is a focus in the immediate capital region of the cities of Troy, Albany, and Schenectady for greater affordability, more economic development into those urban areas, and also extends out into the rural areas as well. At the moment, I'm going to speak about our AGC report, but again, that's a focus and call opportunity agenda, which is really going to be directed for the low and moderate income individuals in the area. Transportation is another element that ties into the low moderate income areas for the capital district cities, as well as that can tie in to Warren and Washington County regions here, and certainly down in Columbia and Greene as well. There was some under the entrepreneurship issue was incorporated the efforts of tourism in that particular area as well. There was some discussions at our Crandall Library meeting of trying to separate the tourism out of that category. And at the present time, it still remains, but I think it's significant that tourism is now into the body of work that will be submitted. So I think that it would be helpful collectively for the Capital Region when they make their presentations to say that all of the 8 counties that make up the Capital Region Economic Development Council are supportive of this plan. Does the plan encompass all of our thoughts and recommendations? No. As an example, we made a strong pitch for broadband. They indicated that there would be future funding available for broadband, which coincidentally during this process, the governor announced that there will be a request for information due during this fall with funding aspect coming forth in early next year. So whether it came from this pot of money or from another segment, we're pleased that the governor is moving forward with broadband. The other area that we would like to have seen is probably the tourism and the arts and entertainment as kind of a standalone. Phil Morris was the representative and co-chair of that subcommittee, along with Andrew Meter from Six Flags. So we certainly had our input and representation into that, and both are great advocates for that category, and I feel confident that if we're one of 3, that there will be ample opportunity to have some tourism and arts-related projects come forth out of that category. But again, many advocates would like to have seen a separate, distinctive category, but it is in the plan.
Any other?
And the only other one I forgot to mention, of course, is agriculture was also highlighted. There are some concepts within the plan that will provide a set-aside of funding for small farmers, as well as for loans, as well as some cooperative working with Todd from the Hudson Agricultural Business Corporation in Rensselaer County. So they tried to touch all of the elements in our particular area.
Okay. We have a resolution then authorizing the chairman to send a letter of support. Fred and John, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Ed, next.
Okay, I just wanted to pass out, this is a summary of a summary. Final summary, you're looking at one of them right here, Mr. B.
Thank you.
And so, that is the summary of the summary, which I'm going to briefly go over this morning. This is the report itself.
We have to read it in the office?
Fred is going right for those pictures,
Oh, yeah.
those colorful pictures that,
He did.
Pays the hard work, I tell you. I got one home, Ed.
Why don't we just,
you want to pass them over there?
I gotta ask Bud for a copy? I'll send it electronic. All right, I don't know.
And the final document, which we made limited copies of, are going to each of the this is the data book that we are providing to the respective planning departments of the County of Warren, Washington, Northern Saratoga area, and to the respective towns. And just kind of working backwards off of this. This is all of the data that developed. And what we did is we're calling our report Pathways to Progress. We identified essentially 4 to 5 different areas: economic development, agriculture and healthy communities, infrastructure, which includes from broadband to wastewater treatment facilities, as well as to alternative wastewater facilities to look at, affordable housing and transportation, broadband and brownfields were all included within those elements here. Also, for purposes of the database, we are providing a flash drive as well as a DVD to try to cut back on paper from Finch paper in regards to this. If we wanted just to spend a couple of seconds here on the executive summary to talk about that, the Adirondack Gateway consists of Warren, Washington, and northern Saratoga County, which includes the town of Moreau, village of South Glens Falls, the town of Day, Hadley, are included within that framework. It's approximately 1,800 square miles is the major area. We also know that within Warren County, 94% of the land mass is within the blue line, the Adirondack Park Agency. I'm sure if I make a little misstep here, Fred will jump right in and correct me as well as Evelyn, so we're well represented. But that became an important element when we started into our economic development area here. And so if you turn to the next page, on page 3 and 4, we provided an executive summary of the sustainable economic development. Some of these are of no surprises, but others it brings out in a little bit of our thought process, is to support manufacturing that uses locally sourced wood, which we know about, but in terms of stone, ceramic, and natural fibers exist within this area. To market our industrial parks to tenants in high-tech research and development, support medical device manufacturing, also support efforts by paper companies to become more involved in packaging and clean room supplies, recruit tech companies, develop opportunities for warehouse buildings, promote use of freight rail in certain of our areas. For the workforce, we want to recruit new workers in millenniums. We want to revitalize safe and attractive urban areas, incubate healthcare, hospitality. As we know, between the Glens Falls Hospital and Hudson Headwater, there's over 3,400 employees within Warren County that work out of those facilities. Hudson Headwater is continuing to stretch their brand throughout the area. Their latest is their connectivity with the University of Vermont and the construction of a new primary care facility in Champlain, New York. University of Vermont will be collaborating more closely, not only with Hudson Headwater, but also it's anticipated with the Glens Falls Hospital as well. So I think that's a very positive move that everybody, as we all know, we need to stay about, Dr. Ruggie is about usually 5 steps ahead of everyone else. He has a brilliant mind and a plan, and really his goal has always been providing better and greater primary care for rural areas of our county, upstate New York, and the connectivity with the Glens Falls Hospital is important, because at the end of the day, Hudson Headwater needs a hospital to send their particular patients to, and I think that between the collaboration of the CEOs of Diane Chabreau from Glens Falls Hospital and Hudson Headwater, Dr. Ruggie, they meet on a regular basis and they're continuing to work together. One of the things that has been talked about in terms of the high-tech and nanotech that we just need to review again is to look at the potential of international high school diploma program. Our region does not have that. There are programs in Niskayuna, Ballston Spa, and Shenendehowa that have that program. So your transfers, those that are involved in nanotechnology and global, that are over here on a temporary basis from Germany or Austria, are involved, and they desire and want that program. It's an expensive program, But I think it's something, again, that perhaps through a consortium of some schools in the area, we might be able to put that back on the, plate again.
Are you sure Queensbury hasn't,
They-
when I was on the board
Yeah.
3 years ago, we had strong discussion about,
It has not been implemented yet.
okay, hasn't been
It
implemented.
hasn't been implemented yet.
I
It's an
know-
as you know,
yeah.
it's an expensive program.
Well, it
but-
wasn't, when it was laid out to us,
Yeah.
it wasn't as expensive
Yeah.
as what we
Yeah.
originally
Mhm.
thought. That's why I thought Queensbury School District was going to
No.
go forward with that. Okay.
We're working on that, and John, sitting on the SUNY board, is an advocate for those kind of programs coming to our area. Again, I've outlined rural labor force, collaboration with the hospital and Hudson Headwater, and then to really attract businesses that reinforce our Adirondack image in Warren County. I think that we can promote our region as a lower cost alternative. We have a potential recreational type of business that is looking to come back to Warren County from a neighboring county south of us, that they're comparing construction costs in that county to Warren County, and including the town of Queensbury, and the cost is just astronomically higher in Saratoga County for not only construction, but the permitting process and so forth. And so that's one of the goals that we need to advance in a positive way. We're not looking to take businesses away from another county, but if they volunteer, look around for other areas. In this particular case here, the business's lease is up in that county, so they came back. They're coming back to look at Warren County very seriously. So that's a positive. Those are just some of the highlights, and also talk about expanding our broadband cell, green energy brand in soil, wind, and so forth. On the next item here, what I briefly alluded to was the opportunity for housing and fair housing equity, meaning that many of our rural residents spend a disproportionate amount of their income on transportation and housing costs. And we need to be looking at ways on how we can enhance our housing programs to provide greater rehabilitation to those that need some help in rehabbing their houses, as well as mobile homes, as well as undertaking a regional first-time homebuyers program, just not for the city of Glens Falls, but for the entire county. Warren County, when Pat Tedish was here, there was a considerable amount of more money for housing, and Warren County had a very aggressive housing program and a community development housing rehab program. Since the monies have decreased, and an approach from the state indicating that they like to provide newcomers to this grant opportunities, Warren County in this region has declined dramatically in housing funds, and so that we need to work together collaboratively and seek a higher rate of funding, not only from the state government, but from the federal government as well. We need to be able to reduce the high cost and look at mechanisms to improve transportation. We know that this area is so dependent on on vehicles that it's still very difficult with the transit systems and the cost to be able to extend their systems. So we really need to come together. What we did find out in our studies is that there's actually more transportation alternatives throughout Warren County and even Washington County than we had thought about. Some of the towns have senior housing busing, and then there's some areas like Matt has up in Horicon that has very little transportation areas. More than, they have, Brant Lake has now 2 taxi cabs to serve Brant Lake, correct? So Matt is moving things forward there in Horicon. But again, we've had calls from people in Horicon and that northern area that just don't have that transportation. When we had one of our AGC outreaches in the town of Chester, that was a major issue that was raised, correct?
Yeah, I remember when, gasoline got to $5 a gallon, it was, And I think when I was chairman of the county board, we wanted to try to find a solution to that, because I think it's inevitable that gasoline's gonna keep going up, and that's gonna be a major obstacle for people that live in the northern outlying parts of the county, just being able to get to work, being able to afford getting to work. I think that's gonna be a huge problem.
So I've listed on page 11 and 12 the various infrastructure and pathways, and then our approach. We've listed all members of the Adirondack Gateway Council, and I would just like to spend 2 more minutes, Mr. Chair, on the full report here, just to highlight what we tried to do with our report. And I think I passed out my little crib notes that I had. But if you have one that's all marked up red, that was mine. But nonetheless, what we have tried to do is highlight a variety of businesses or needs throughout the entire county. Starting on page 7, we recognize large communities, small communities from our region. Those are the pathways on page 7 and 8. Sustainable economic development, healthy communities and ag, opportunity, housing, fair housing, transportation, and comprehensive areas today. Some positive news on the right-hand side in terms of the population is growing, although it's smaller than other elements on page 10 of the area. Homes are increasing in value. Unemployment is dropping. We're forecasting 6,200 new jobs in the next 7 years. There are 760,000 workers to draw in from a 20-mile radius, and that's helpful for us to recruit businesses. The number of farms, I think 13 farms in the last 7 years has increased by 13 farms in Warren County. Washington County has had an increase, but they've had a dramatic decrease in the number of acres that has been set aside for ag. This is a mapping on page 12 of the AGC area, which many of you are familiar with that entire area here. On page 13, rather than just saying, there is one of our issues is that we're so highly dependent on automobiles, showing the Exit 20 issue. Some new development in Lake George with the Marriott Hotel, which is trying to increase their off-season. On page 15 is just a notation of some of the newer businesses that are coming out of agriculture. From Hicks, right part of Hicks Farms is the farm winery with cider house. And we are working to change the federal regulations that would permit them to have a higher rate of alcohol within their cider. Community engagement, we talked about community engagement. I might add that the Upstate American Planning Association has awarded the Gateway Council an award for our public engagement that has been completed. That's a picture. We were over at Garden Works in Salem. A little snapshot there. On the other pages, that was on page 19, that was taken up in Chester with Jeff Mosley, that was there from the Housing Assistance Coalition. That was a tour in Salem with HUD representatives. On the right, we continued our tour in Washington County, Crandall Library. There's a picture of everybody at Garden Works. We were over in Hadley, Luzerne, Day area earlier this spring, and that's a picture of, I think that's Preston Jenkins at the out there putting down his comments from the town of Moreau on the page 21. These were the various public engagement spots that we hit. We hit populated area as well as the rural areas, as well as a community survey that was passed out online, as well as at some farmers markets. Obviously, if you don't have web, it doesn't help to have an online survey. But we did try to get those out as well as through supervisors. Again, focusing on economic development, shovel-ready sites through our area is important. On page 26 is just the sustainable economic development. When the Davidsons went to downtown Glens Falls in 1992, it was a pretty barren area, correct, Bud?
That's right.
And it's kind of moved along in a more positive direction. Important, very much important that we align and work very closely with SUNY at Adirondack. We've mentioned here, Dr. Duffy's efforts on job training, the application with Schenectady Community College and SUNY at Adirondack. Hopefully there'll be some positive news coming out of that grant application soon. On the right is C.R. Bard and Angiodynamics, two of our keystone areas. The change in going to Gracenote, a subsidiary of Tribune Media, which again is new technology. It fits very well with the younger demographics in our area. We have local company in South Glens Falls that we wanted to highlight, Common Roots Brewery. We have Just Beverage in downtown Glens Falls listed there. That's Garden Works. On the next page, we have a winery that has been able to adapt to cold weather grapes in conjunction with Cornell Institute University over in Corinth that they're very well. Warren County on that page 35, 31 new farms during this period of 2007 to 2013. And Washington County has lost acreage as well, obviously. Talking about the innovation that some of the agriculture is doing with Farmers Market on wheels with the King's Brothers Dairy Farm in Gansevoort, Northumberland. Also our connection and highlighting Lakes to Locks in terms of their efforts as well as Wayne's work with his grant programs. Also highlighted our ski areas of Gore Mountain and West Mountain in the area. 39, put this in for Bud for Bark Eaters Chocolates. I know Bud is a big chocolate, but again, these small little businesses that we're trying to point out along with some major industries is very important to the growth and the sustainability of our region. And again, if we're going to recruit and keep people in the area, we need to have, as I mentioned before, greater affordable housing throughout our area. We talk about affordable housing, the rehab programs, first-time homebuyer, Habitat for Humanity. Those are the kind of things that we need to connect into, as well as senior citizens. We talk about in a recent survey, Glens Falls was ranked 30th out of 153 communities in New York State as a place for millennium job seekers. So we're a little bit better, you know, we're increasing, but we need to improve that. So affordable housing is going to be important, as well as transportation. The trolley has been very successful running between Glens Falls, Lake George, and Bolton, as well as that we need to be doing more with Amtrak. Person gets off in Fort Edward, there's really no service. They tried a couple of years ago to have transit service from there, but it's so infrequent there that's a service we should take more advantage of, as well as with Saratoga. The schedule is just backwards in Fort Edward. You really have to go in the afternoon to go to New York City and stay overnight before you can come back if you go on the east side. If you go to Saratoga and drive to Saratoga, you can take the train. The difficulty is that train will go to Rensselaer and stop, and you may have to wait an hour and a half, 2 hours. So you might as well drive down.
That's what most people do it.
And that's what they do. And you know, if you get up at 5 o'clock, you can get down there and take one of the early trains and be back by evening. I think the last train's 11:50 out of New York City. You don't want to miss that. And again, we talked about the broadband on page 58. We want to talk about here, we have mentioned the new technology for wastewater treatment that we have listed on page 59 that we need to be looking at. And I didn't mean to overskip 58 when we do make reference to Thurman's on top of page 58 there. You probably saw that already.
I saw that.
Okay. All right. And again, we talked about, the Jefferson project as well as the, issue of salt, in the lake and impacting, Lake George, and we have a little reference, to that, to identify that as a major issue, within Warren County on page 60. We talk about the mixed use, we talk about, bike and pedestrian issues in referencing our, full approach to that. We mentioned industry down in Easton, Hollingsworth, and company, down there too. We talk about brownfields, you can see on the page 63, the middle of the page, which is the Mullen, which is right on the line of Glens Falls and Queensbury, and there's Fred's solar panels in Chester, down there by his, town hall, in the particular area. Talk about downtown, and on page 67, again, we highlight, our efforts at SUNY, but also the study and survey that came back indicated that, they would like to stay in the area if all possible from the schools that were surveyed, the SUNY schools, which included, St. Lawrence, Paul Smith, Clarkson, North Country Community College, SUNY, Potsdam, Adirondack, and Plattsburgh. All had indicated their desire to remain into the, area. Then we get into some technical reports, which are more detailed here, and the location codant, chart, which divides, all these big balloons and small balloons into, a bar above, which shows competitive on the right, at risk, red on the left, and then the below line is declining or emerging. And you need a little bit of, clear head to read through this a little bit. And a lot of this, because you're heavily involved in county business and economic development, you can sense some of this. But also, one of the, surprises really is one of the, underlooked areas is the mining and utilities, that we have into this area. Obviously, the forestry, fishing and hunting, are also important, to our area. We talked about Hudson Headwater. We also mentioned the, emergence of the Adirondack Health Institute, which is really the overseer now of healthcare, in our area. Page 73, we beat Channel 17 with their documentary on Charlie Wood by having a page here, but also from Charlie Wood up to Six Flags, the importance of, the tourism aspect, but also the employment aspect for, Six Flags, in our area. On, page 75, we talked a little bit about this region being the Catheter Valley, started by Dave, Sheridan in our area. On the page right, we mentioned Battenkill Valley, we mentioned Bark Eater Chocolates, we, mentioned maple, syrup in our area. There's a picture of Mike Hill, and also, Argyle cheese. And then, one of our legacy events on page 77 is the Balloon Festival, our library, our civic center, our other events. We do have, Americade in here. We talked a little bit about Global, Finch, Irving Tissue, the impact of wood in our area. And then we have on page 82, and, which, I'm not gonna go through, but we, identified through our surveys, through our workshops, SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats to our region, of what some of our strengths are that range from things that we assume to other items that we may not have thought about a little bit to our, weaknesses. And we start right off the top there with broadband gaps, cellular gaps, agriculture distribution, in the area, the seasonality of tourism, the rural brain drain from our area that we've got to, stop, transportation, public, infrastructure, housing, some education areas, all the way down to the issues of lack of meaningful mandated relief reform for local governments does have a drain on our area and impact. The multiple layers of local government, the lack of industrial retail base in certain areas, more so in Washington County than here, limited land for development due to APA, the lack of hotel conference centers, in our, area, a few export industries, in the area. So that's a list of some of our weaknesses. We have some great opportunities, And then there are also some threats that we need to be, looking at and, addressing. And we talk about various other entities here on page 84. On page 85, one of the highlights with wood, we sometimes forget about that, Telescope is very actively involved in their manufacturing products, and so we wanted to highlight them. The quality of life in our vision. We mentioned on page 90 the certified headquarters of Spartan's Mine in downtown, our craft beverages, and again, our detailed plans that we have mentioned Fort Edward on page 99 is the Americade that we have, along with identifying organizations and so forth. So that is the highlight, and then this is the information that is gathered that really is the data. That is taken in-depth data. Surveys, we met with all, basically, I can't never say all, but all of the social service organizations from the commissioners of the 3 counties to Community Action Agency to Senior Citizen Housing to the Veterans Administration in Warren and Washington County and Saratoga County to cover all of their particular needs and so forth. This study was ongoing over about a 2.5-year period, and it's just now been released at our last AGC meeting a couple of weeks ago and today, so I wanted to give you a little bit of highlights. Next step on this is to formulate certain committees out of this. For instance, we're formulating and taking the Coalition of Our Housing, which had groups from the North Country Ministry to, again, social services to county officials in Warren and Washington and northern Saratoga County. So we want to take, and we'll be organizing that a little bit later this fall, and arrange those subcommittees, if you will, by interest topic, and send that out to supervisors and decide which committee you'd like to serve on. We're going to use those committees to get into the details, as well as to immediately seek where we can, with a consensus, funding in these particular areas. And as you know, we're very dependent on the cycle of funding. So sometimes we have to move quicker than perhaps we want in order just to get into the cycle, and that's what we need to do. We do not want to have this report on the shelf very long. We want to make this a working document, and I want to thank all of the County of Warren for your support, and the respective towns, the work of Fred in Chester, Matt in the North Country, as well as all the supervisors. At one time or another, essentially, were at some of our meetings during the courses. We had good attendance through the area, and our goal is to go back to those communities and report back to them. So that's really our next step. We've already, just one thing, we've already pulled out some things. We pulled out when the study was not done, to apply for the grant with the cooperation of the town of Queensbury and the other towns that made up the wastewater treatment plant area between Glens Falls and Fort Edward. And so we've started that, we applied for the grant, we've started that process, already as one particular area. We really have started pulling out the broadband with your assistance here, Brian LaFleur in Warren County, Washington County, Northern Saratoga, of finishing those surveys that the county has agreed to provide if there's any more, monies that's required for those surveys, so we can have those done for funding application that we'll be due next year in broadband. So as soon as something comes up, and if we feel we're able to move ahead, that's what we're going to do.
Thanks, Ed. Any other concerns or other business? Doug?
Yeah, just a couple comments. First of all, I find this very thorough, Ed. I don't see any stones not unturned. And so, and this is not meant to be derogatory in any means, but very little, if anything, was mentioned about the airport. We're spending close to $800,000 a year at the airport. ACRA recently said they're going to be not developing over there, I guess, is my understanding. So so I guess I'm asking you.
Nothing to do with the airport issue.
Yeah, yeah, and I never
yeah.
thought that they came there because of the
Yeah.
airport.
They would have preferred if if from their position, they would have preferred to have remained there but in terms of construction costs, on how they envisioned the building, it became too costly.
Right, right, but the airport wasn't the reason they came, the airport's not the reason they're leaving, okay. Changed. So I guess my question to you is, where do you see the airport fitting? I mean,
We had
where-
listed this as a opportunity.
Opportunity,
as an-
that was
as-
why,
As an
I saw
as an
airport
opportunity.
in 95
We
pages
did,
was-
as an opportunity, and I think that speaks what we need to do. I think that would require a whole subset, of information to, delve into, which again, we're doing this at a higher level of review for the entire region. But we identified that as a opportunity, for our region, to look at and report that back into the county, which I'm, doing here today. But certainly, it was calculated, as an asset for Warren County.
Yeah, we have a nice airport, yes.
Okay, any other comments? Mark?
Go ahead, Fred, you're on.
Well, I just noticed in a couple places we talk about freight rail, passenger rail, and, there's a strong movement developing of environmental groups that they're trying to pressure the state to buy the rail, particularly from North Creek to Haas, because of this, the proposal to store the rail cars there, but also from North Creeks, south to Saratoga. And I think at some point, some committee needs to address that and take a position on it. Through the review board, we've been asked to take a position in the Adirondack Explorer. They're doing a debatable piece, but I think with that pressure on the tank car storage, there's gonna be strong pressure on the governor and the legislature to DEC to buy the rail, and there goes the freight rail and the passenger.
Well, as you know, there are
Yeah.
two wings, the east, in Washington County, and
Right,
the west.
right.
And along the east is where the Glens Falls line comes in at Fort Edward, and still serves to this day, the cement company, Finch Paper,
Right.
occasionally, the Post Star in that area, and a scrap iron yard,
Mhm.
which is not using it locally.
Right.
But the key really, is right, there is going to be, pressure, and, through, the invitation of Supervisor Strau, I met, the other day with Lloyd, Mott, and another representative to discuss that, issue, and concern that they have, and, their proposal. Now, I think has to be weighed from a feasibility point. And again, if we're not gonna be able to develop, north of North Creek in that line, and it's not gonna be ever developed or connected in anywhere else, and if the industry of that area is not really, feeling it's an advantage, one of the things that I'm learning is that even though we may, in certain circumstances, have rail be good for the, producer of that material, a lot of the people that are receiving it are not in a position to receive that by rail, that they're so geared up for a truck. So we have to kind of, balance that off, and at the end of the day, there's still gonna be the promotion of rail, through the east end, or, further down into Saratoga, into the Port of Albany, and also the, Port of Queens, which is, developing. But it needs, a full airing.
Right,
by
with the broader issue is if the state gets control of the easement, then, then you're not even gonna be able to use it for other things that may be needed, utilities and broadband and fiber optics, and, so I mean, it's a broader question than just running the trains on it,
Right.
the easement itself.
I agree.
Mark?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Great job. Is this online?
It's gonna be online, we just got added printing done today.
Okay.
Or a couple days ago, and we're gonna be putting this, it'll be online.
Yeah, I wanna send this out, and people, this is outstanding work. West Mountain.
Yes.
November 12th is ribbon cutting ceremony for their, new chairlift.
Yes.
They're investing $2 million private money out there.
Mhm.
It's a great jewel of an asset for Kingsbury and our region, but I just mentioned that. I took a tour, I know John's been out there.
And I, myself and John Wheatley were there, earlier this year,
Yeah.
and it gave us, a glance at their plans, including the recent acquisition.
That's great. They're looking obviously for an investor for, you know, a facility at the Triple
And
Chair.
we're gonna be sitting down with them once, we've kind of explained the state process, of funding, the federal process of funding.
Just so happens your attorney brought the bylaws with him.
Their organizational.
That would be great.
But I think they got a little bit more work in that area.
Okay, just real quickly, not a lot of time, but everything all set with Just now? Just Beverages, everything's all settled down and we're in good shape there?
I was,
Oh, okay.
litigation has been filed.
It has been filed.
That will wind its way through court, but in the interim, Just Beverage continues to, line up the distribution with Eagle Beverages now that will be distributing the water through the area, as well as they're working on a national distributor for them.
At Glen Falls property next to Miller Mechanical, Elizabeth Miller's property, is that a brownfield site, Steve?
Which site is that?
That old dump
Mullins.
area?
Mullins still owns it.
Mullins still
Yeah,
owns
we
it?
are working with the Mullins family.
Any progress on getting that cleaned up?
We're in the process of having, we received an EPA, grant, and we're in the, phase 2 of getting, detailed, samples from the ground and so forth, in there. That's why you see those barrels out there, they're over, well sites.
Last question, Grace Note, what's the word?
Gracework is very positive. You know, I reported like a year ago or a year and a half ago when there was great concern over numbers dropping there and moving it to offshore. I contacted Senator Schumer's office. The senator jumped in and spoke to the CEO and told me what the CEO's phone number, cell phone, and his office direct line from the senator, and he has indicated that they intend to be current and strengthen their workforce here. They're very pleased with the workforce here. They were not anxious. They had some issues with the offshore. And so that's the word we get from the top of Grayson.
All right, good news. Thanks.
It's a key employer for our region, as you know. And I know that John has expressed, you know, very much support for anything that we can do. We have offered support for any type of technology grants if there need technology grants in that area. They are developing, you know, they do other than just you know, American English speaking communities. They do you know, Canada, so French, and a lot of Spanish as well. So that's one area that we may have to develop a little bit more. They do have a small little office.
Hey, Ron?
Just as a note of information, a long time ago when we decided to buy the rail line, Warren County did a study and I guess the seeker said that one of the things in the seeker was to do nothing, take the track up, sell the steel for $2 million and pave it. And it was kind of an interesting thought, but you know, we were thinking of the choo-choo train and all of that good stuff, and it's worthy of a relook, I think, an important relook. The other thing that none of us realized until we got into restoring the old track is that there's 3,500 rails or ties between per mile. So, you know, you start thinking about 3,500 of these pieces of wood that we got to replace, and it was a lot more costly than we imagined.
Any other comments? Motion adjourned. Evelyn and John. Okay, we're gonna have an LDC audit and finance